I'm going to have to make a very big apology to my noble friend, the noble Lord Sassoon, because I'm about to raise a subject which I shouldn't raise, and which is going to be one which I think is now time to put on a higher awareness and to explain to the House as a whole, as I don't think they have any knowledge of. I'm sorry the noble Lord Strathclyde is not with us at the moment, because this deeply concerns him also. But for the last 20 weeks, since yesterday afternoon, I have been engaged in a very strange dialogue with the two noble lords, in the course of which I've been trying to bring to their attention the willing availability of a strange organisation which wishes to make a great deal of money available to assist the recovery of the economy in this country. For want of a better description of their name, I'll call them Foundation X. It's not their real name, but it'll do for the moment. Foundation X was introduced to me 20 weeks ago last week by a very eminent city firm, FSA controlled, by its chairman, who came to me, and its chairman said, we have this extraordinary request to assist in doing this major financial reconstruction. It's mega bucks, but we need your help to assist us in understanding whether this business is legitimate. I had the biggest put down of my life from the noble Lord Strathclyde when I told him this story first of all. He said, why you? You're not important enough to have the answer to a question like that. And he's quite right. My noble Lord, I'm not important enough. But the answer to the next question was, you haven't got the experience for it. Yes, I do. I have had one of the biggest experiences in the laundry of terrorist money and of funny money that anybody's had in the city. I've handled billions of terrorist money. Not into my pocket. The biggest terrorist client I had was the IRA, and I'm pleased to say that I managed to write off more than £1 billion of their money. I've also had extensive connections with North African terrorists, but that's of a far nastier nature, and I don't want to talk about that because that's still a security issue. I would also hasten to add, it's no use getting the police in for me, because I shall immediately call the Bank of England as my defence witness, as they put me in to deal with these problems. So the point is that I was, in the course of doing this very strange activity, I got a very interesting set of phone numbers and references which I could go to for help when I needed it. And so people in the city have known that if they want to check out anything that looks at all odd, they can come to me and I can press a few phone numbers and get a reference. And so they came to me and asked me whether I would get them a reference and a clearance on Foundation X. And for 20 weeks I've been endeavouring to do so. I myself have come to the absolute conclusion that they are completely genuine and sincere, and that they are quite directly wishing to make the United Kingdom one of the principal points for which they will use to disseminate their extraordinary great wealth into the world at this present moment as part of an attempt to seek the economic recovery of the global economy. And so I made the phone call to my noble friend Lord Strathclyde on a Sunday afternoon. I think he was sitting on his lawn, poor man. And he did the quickest ball pass I've ever seen. If England can do anything like it at Twickenham on such Saturday, we have a chance against the All Blacks. And the next thing I knew, I'd got the noble Lord Sassoon on the phone instead. And he, from the outset, took the quite right, proper defensive attitude of total scepticism and said, this possibly can't be right. In the course of the following weeks, I had, first of all, the noble Lord Sassoon said, go and talk to the Bank of England. So I phoned the Governor of the Bank of England and said, could he please check this out for me? And he came back after about 3 days and said, you can get lost. I'm not touching this with a barge pole. It's far too difficult. Take it back to the Treasury. So I did. And within another day, the noble Lord Sassoon had come back and said, this is rubbish. It can't possibly be right. So I said, well, I'm going to work more on it. And then I had a meeting with the noble Lord Strathclyde, and I actually bought one of the senior executives of from Foundation X to meet Lord Strathclyde. I have to say that as first dates go, it was not a great success. Neither of them ended up by inviting the other one up for a coffee or a drink at the end of the evening, and they didn't exchange telephone numbers in order to be able to follow up the call. In fact, I found myself between a rock and a hard place, represented by both a rock and a hard place, which were totally paranoid about each other. because the Foundation X people have got an amazing obsession with their own security. They are expecting only to be contacted by somebody equal to head of state status, or somebody who has an international security rating equal to the top 6 people in the world. And this is such a strange situation. So both the noble Lord Sassoon and the noble Lord Strathclyde both came up with what should have been an absolute killer argument as to why this could not be true and we should forget it. Noble Lord Sassoon's argument first was that these people were offering evidence, or they claimed evidence, that they had lodged £5 billion with British banks last year. And they gave dates and they gave transfer dates and the details of these transfers. And as noble Lord Sassoon said, if that was true, it would stick out like a sore thumb. You couldn't have £5 billion popping out of a bank account without it disrupting the balance sheet completely. But I remember that about the same time that those transfers were being made, the noble Lord Miners was indulging in his game of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic of the British banking community. And if he had had 3 banks at that time, which had had, say, a deficiency of £1.5 billion each, then you'd pretty well have absorbed the entire £5 billion, and you wouldn't have the sore thumb stick out on this at that time, because you'd have put £1.5 billion into each of 3 banks, and you'd have lost the lot, or absorbed the lot. That would be a logical explanation. I don't know. Noble Lord Strathclyde came up with a much different argument. He said, this cannot be right. This cannot be right, because these people said at the meeting with him that they were still effectively on the gold standard from back in the 1920s, and that their entire currency holdings throughout the world, which were very large, were backed by bullion. And the noble Lord Strathclyde came back and said to me, he's had his analysts working on it, and this has to be stuff and nonsense, because he said they had come up with a figure for the amount of bullion that would have been needed to cover their currency reserves as claimed, which would be more than the entire value of bullion that had ever been mined in the history of the world. I'm sorry, but the noble Lord Strathclyde is wrong. His analysts are wrong, because what he had done was he had tapped into the sources which are available, and there is only one definitive source for the amount of bullion that has ever been taken from the Earth's crust, and that was a National Geographic magazine article 12 years ago. And whatever figure it was that they quoted was then quoted again by 6 other sites on the internet, on Google, and so everybody's quoting one original source, and there is no other confirming authority. But if you tack into the Vatican accounts of the Vatican Bank, you come up with a claim of total bullion.
The noble Lord is into his 15th minute. I wonder if he could draw his remarks to a conclusion.
The total value of the Vatican Bank reserves would claim to be more than the entire value of gold ever mined in the history of the world. Now, my point on all of this is that we have not proven any of this. Foundation X are saying at this present moment that they are prepared to put up the entire £5 billion for the funding and creation of the 3i recreation. The British government can have the entire independent management and control of it. They don't want anything to do with it. There will be no interest charged. And by the way, if the British government would like it as well, if it will help, they will be prepared to put up money for funding hospitals, schools, the building of Crossrail immediately with 17 billion transfer by Christmas if requested, and all these other things. These things can be done if wished, but we have to have a senior member of the government has to accept the invitation to a phone call to the chairman of the company concerned, Foundation X, and then we can get into business. And all I'm asking is that this is too big an issue. I'm just an ageing, obsessive old peer, and I'm easily dispensable, but getting to the truth is not, and we need to know what really is happening here. My lords, we must find out the truth of this situation.